I heard the truck pull into my driveway at 10:30 on a Tuesday night in February. I wasn't asleep. At 63, sleep comes slower than it used to, and I'd been sitting in my armchair with a cold cup of coffee and the television on low, not really watching it, just keeping the house from feeling too quiet. When I opened the front door, my daughter Mara was standing on the porch steps in a thin jacket, holding my 5-year-old grandson Owen so tightly he'd stopped squirming. Rain had soaked through both of them. Owen's sneakers made a wet, sucking sound with every small shift of his weight. His face was buried against her shoulder, and he wasn't crying. That was the part that scared me most. A boy that age should have been crying. Mara looked at me the way she had when she was 7 years old and broke her wrist falling out of the oak tree in our backyard, like she was waiting for someone to tell her how bad it really was. "Daddy," she said. I stepped aside. "Get in here." She walked past me carrying Owen. I shut the door behind her and turned the bolt. The rain drummed hard against the windows. The furnace was already running, and the house smelled faintly of the chili I'd made for dinner and the pine cleaner I used on the floors every Sunday, the way my late wife Joanne always had. Owen let Mara set him down on the couch. He looked around my living room like he was trying to remember where he was. Then he pulled his knees up and leaned against the armrest without a word. "He needs dry clothes," Mara said. "I'll find something." I went to the hall closet and pulled out the old flannel throw Joanne had kept on the reading chair for years. I brought it to Owen and tucked it around his shoulders. He looked up at me with those serious dark eyes he'd had since the day he was born. "Hey, buddy." "Hi, Pap." His voice was barely there. I crouched down to his level. "You warm enough?" He nodded, but didn't say anything else. I smoothed the blanket over his feet and stood up. Mara was in the kitchen doorway. She'd stopped dripping, but she hadn't taken off her jacket. Her hair was pressed flat against the sides of her face. She looked like someone who had made a decision and was terrified it was the wrong one. "Sit down," I told her. She sat at the kitchen table. I put the kettle on and didn't ask anything. Joanne taught me that. She used to say that people will tell you the truth when you give them room to breathe. It's too early, and they give you the short version. Wait, and you get the whole story. It took Mara a few minutes. She stared at the table, wrapped both hands around the mug I set in front of her, and finally started talking. "He came home around 8. He told me we needed to talk." She shook her head slightly. "He said he'd been unhappy for a long time, that he'd met someone, that her name was Kristen and she was 29 and she worked in his office." I kept my face still. Then his sister showed up. Mara looked toward the window. "Patrice." She had 2 suitcases with her. She walked in the front door and went straight upstairs to the guest room like it was already her room. I set my own mug down carefully. "Ryan said Kristen was moving in at the end of the week. He said Patrice was coming to help with the transition." Mara's jaw tightened. "He said I should start figuring out where Owen and I were going to go." I waited. "So I told him that was our home. I paid half that mortgage for 4 years. I signed those papers. My name is on the deed." She looked at me. "He laughed, Daddy." He actually laughed. He said I didn't understand how things worked. He said the house was in a trust. Something went cold in my chest. He showed me a paper. I don't even know what it was. He said the trust had been restructured and that I wasn't listed as a beneficiary anymore. Her voice cracked for the first time. He said if I wanted to make it complicated, I was welcome to try. Then Patrice came downstairs and started putting our coats by the door. Owen had fallen asleep on the couch by the time Mara finished. I could see him through the doorway, his small chest rising and falling, the flannel blanket tucked up to his chin. I stood up, got my truck keys off the hook by the door, and put on my jacket. "Daddy." Mara was right behind me. "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet." I said it because it was true. I knew where I wanted to go. I knew exactly what I wanted to say and to whom. But Joanne's voice was already in the back of my head, the way it always was when I was about to make a mistake driven by anger instead of sense. I drove through Knoxville for almost an hour. Through neighborhoods I'd worked in for 30 years as a licensed electrician, streets where I'd wired new homes and rewired old ones. I knew this city block by block. I ended up in the parking lot of the home improvement warehouse, where I still bought supplies sometimes, just sitting in the dark with the rain on the windshield, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. Joanne would have said, "Russell Gaines, if you walk in that house tonight, you will make every single thing worse." And she would have been right. She always was. I drove home. Mara was asleep on the couch beside Owen. her head tipped back, still wearing her jacket. I pulled off her shoes and covered them both with the extra blanket from the closet, then sat at the kitchen table with my coffee until the sky outside turned gray. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was thinking about a trust document and why my son-in-law had been so confident. The following week moved slowly. Mara took Owen to school each morning from my house, then came back and sat in my kitchen looking at nothing. She'd taken leave from her job at the pediatric clinic where she worked as an administrator. She told her supervisor there was a family situation. She didn't give details, and they didn't push, because she'd been there 8 years, and they trusted her. Owen adjusted the way children do, which is to say, faster than any adult deserves. Within 3 days, he'd staked a claim on my spare bedroom, lined up his 5 action figures on the windowsill, and informed me that we needed to get a better brand of cereal. It should have made me smile. It did, for about half a second, before I remembered why he was there. One morning I found Mara standing in front of the kitchen window before sunrise, coffee untouched, staring at the backyard where Owen's muddy sneakers were drying on the porch rail. "You haven't eaten?" I said. "I keep thinking I'll go home and this will have been something I dreamed." I stood beside her. We looked at the sneakers for a while. "I should have seen it coming," she said. "Why?" "He handled everything. All the finances. Every time I wanted to sit down and go through the accounts, he said he had it covered. I just trusted him." I thought about that. Ryan Calloway was an operations director for a regional logistics company. He wore pressed shirts. He coached Owen's soccer team last spring. He'd given me a firm handshake at Christmas and asked about my knee surgery with what seemed like genuine concern. And for 4 years, he had quietly controlled every piece of paper that came into that house. That afternoon, I made one phone call. Not to a lawyer. Not yet. To a man named Gerald Park, who had spent 32 years as a real estate title examiner in Knox County before retiring to fish and bother his grandchildren. We'd known each other since the late 90s when I'd wired 3 properties he was closing on the same week. He'd sent me 2 hours of work in exchange. I'd sent him a bottle of bourbon. We'd been friends since. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Russell Gaines, you're not dead." "Not yet. I need a favor, Gerald." "What kind?" "Tell me what you can find out about a residential trust in Knox County. My son-in-law says he restructured it and my daughter's off it. I want to know if that's legal." Silence. Then, "Come to the house." His kitchen smelled like strong coffee and fishing line. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote down everything I told him, then disappeared into his study. I drank 2 cups of coffee and waited. When he came back, he sat down across from me and folded his hands. "The trust exists. Ryan Calloway is the named trustee." He paused. "Your daughter was listed as a co-beneficiary when the trust was originally created." I leaned forward. The trust was amended 14 months ago. Her name was removed." Gerald met my eyes. "Russell, trust amendments require the consent of all beneficiaries. There should be a signed consent document." And if Mara never signed one?" He nodded slowly. "Then the amendment may not be valid. And if the amendment isn't valid, she may still have a legal interest in that property." It was the first moment in a week that I'd felt something other than cold fury. I drove home and called Mara before I'd even gotten through the front door. "Do not sign anything Ryan sends you, not 1 page. He already emailed me some documents. Don't touch them. And call me if he contacts you again." She paused. "He texted this morning. He said the faster I cooperate, the easier this will be." I almost smiled. "Did he?" "He said lawyers just make everything expensive and drawn out. A man who has already done something wrong will always try to talk you out of getting a lawyer." I said it calmly because I believed it. The following week, Mara and I sat down with an attorney named Diane Fowler, whose office was in a brick building 2 blocks from the courthouse. She was in her early 60s, silver-haired, and carried herself like someone who had heard every version of every story and still managed to stay interested. She listened to Mara for 45 minutes without interrupting, making occasional notes in a small leather journal. When Mara finished, Diane asked her first question. "Mrs. Calloway." Mara shook her head gently. "I'm going back to Harmon, my maiden name." Diane nodded and kept moving. "Have you ever signed any document amending the terms of the property trust?" "No." "Are you absolutely certain?" "Yes. I would remember that." Diane pulled a folder from her desk. "Then I'd like you to look at something." She placed a printed document between us. Near the signature line at the bottom was a signature above Mara's printed name. Mara leaned forward and stared at it for several seconds. That's not my signature. Diane didn't look surprised. I didn't believe it would be. She set the document aside. Miss Harmon, what I'm about to say goes beyond the scope of a divorce proceeding. If your signature on this document is forged, your husband didn't just betray your marriage. He may have committed a crime. The drive home was quiet. Mara stared out the passenger window at the gray Tennessee hills. How did he think he'd get away with it? She finally asked. He thought nobody would check. He thought I'd just go. I kept my eyes on the road. He thought wrong. The following weeks tested every bit of patience I had. Diane explained that proving forgery requires certified documents, handwriting experts, and time. The kind of time that feels like punishment when you're the person who was wronged. Mara started seeing a counselor on Thursday afternoons. She didn't want to at first. I don't need to talk to a stranger about my life, she said one evening while we cleared dinner dishes. Maybe not, I said. But you need to talk to someone who isn't your father. She went. After a few weeks, she admitted it was helping. Not because it erased anything, she told me, but because it was the first place she was allowed to say she was angry without worrying about how it affected Owen. Owen had his own way of processing. He was 5, which meant he didn't have language for it yet, but one evening I reached past him to get something off the kitchen shelf, and he flinched, not dramatically. Just a small, reflexive pull away, like something was coming that he needed to dodge. He looked up and saw my face, and immediately went back to his coloring. But I'd seen it. And I walked out to my workshop in the garage and stood there for 10 minutes with my hands pressed flat on the workbench, staring at the floor. A 5-year-old boy should not flinch. Ryan retained an attorney. Diane called to let us know. His name was Thomas Beaumont, and he had a photograph on his firm's website that communicated exactly how pleased he was with himself. His initial strategy, she explained, was to argue that Mara had signed the trust amendment willingly and simply didn't recall doing so, that she had been uninterested in the finances of the household and had signed documents without reading them, that this was a pattern of behavior on her part, not misconduct on Ryan's. Reading those claims made the back of my neck go hot. Mara sat very still when Diane explained it. He's going to make me sound careless. He's going to try, Diane said. Which is why we need a handwriting expert who can say definitively, not probably, definitively, that that signature is not yours. The expert was a forensic document examiner out of Nashville named Patricia Howell. She spent 3 weeks comparing the contested signature against 46 verified samples of Mara's handwriting, pulled from 8 years of personal records, school forms, and medical documents. When her report came back, her conclusion was unambiguous. The signature on the trust amendment was not consistent with Mara Harmon Calloway's authentic handwriting across any variable tested. Diane called me on a Thursday morning. Sit down, Russell. I was already sitting. What is it? Patricia's report came in. It's strong. She paused. And the Knox County DA's office has been in contact. They've been reviewing the documents we submitted. I closed my eyes. There may be criminal charges. I'd been grocery shopping the week before when I ran into Ryan. He was in the deli section with a woman I didn't recognize, laughing at something on his phone. He looked up and saw me. The laugh faded just slightly, but he recovered fast. He actually nodded at me. A confident, dismissive little nod, like I was someone he'd beaten at golf 6 months ago and nearly forgotten. I stood there with a handbasket full of oranges and soup cans and looked at him for what felt like a very long time. Then I turned around and walked to a different aisle. My hands shook the whole drive home. I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. That night I told Mara what had happened. I almost said something. She looked at me for a moment. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. She picked up her coffee. Diane says patience is a strategy. Diane is right. March came in with cold rain and bare mud, the last stubborn grip of a Tennessee winter. Then something shifted. Diane called on a Wednesday afternoon. Her voice was different from the usual procedural updates. Measured. Careful. I need you both to come in. When we arrived, there was a woman already seated in the conference room. She stood as we entered. I didn't recognize her at first. She was younger than I expected, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back without any particular attention. She looked like someone who hadn't slept well in several weeks. It was Kristen, Mara stopped in the doorway. I put my hand on her arm. Kristen looked directly at Mara. I know you don't have any reason to trust me. I'm not asking you to. She swallowed. I'm here because I found out he lied to me too. She'd brought everything in a manila envelope. Bank statements showing transfers she hadn't understood. Emails Ryan had sent her in which he described the property as having already cleared any legal complications. A text chain in which he told her Mara had agreed to everything and just needed time to adjust. And one message, sent the week before he told Mara to leave, in which Ryan wrote, "She'll go quietly. She doesn't have the backbone for a fight." Mara read that line twice. She didn't say anything. She folded the paper very deliberately and set it down. Kristen's attorney explained that she was cooperating fully with both Diane and the DA's office. She had received no formal legal advice from Ryan regarding the property. She had believed he was separated and that the home situation was resolved. She had not known about the trust amendment or its contents. Diane thanked her and let her attorney do the rest of the talking. When they left, the conference room was very quiet. Mara looked at the table. Do I feel sorry for her? I don't know, I said. That's yours to decide. She nodded once. She should have asked more questions. She should have. But he's the one who lied. Yes, I said. He is. Diane leaned forward. Kristen's cooperation fills the gaps we needed. Ryan told her specific things about that property that he could only have known if he knew the amendment was fraudulent. 3 days later, the warrant was issued. Mara called me from the grocery store parking lot. She was crying, but they were different tears than the ones she'd shed on my porch in February. I could hear it in her voice. Daddy. They arrested him. I was in my workshop. I set down the wire stripper I'd been holding and sat on the edge of my old work stool. Okay, I said. That's all you're going to say? I'm going to say it took long enough. But okay covers it. She laughed, and that sound, in the middle of all that had happened, was worth every slow and grinding week of it. The hearing was on a Monday in April. Knox County Courthouse, 9 o'clock. Mara barely slept the night before. I found her in the kitchen at 5:30, standing at the window with her arms folded, watching the sunrise. Owen's backpack was already packed and sitting by the door for my neighbor to take him to school. What if I get up there and fall apart? You won't. What if they make me sound foolish for not knowing what was in my own trust documents? I poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of her. Then you explain that you trusted your husband because that's what you do in a marriage, and that trusting someone who turned out to be dishonest doesn't make you foolish. It makes him a liar. One, she picked up the mug. You've been practicing that since about 3 this morning. She smiled. It was small, but it was real. The courthouse parking garage was half full by the time we arrived. People hurried through the lobby with briefcases and coffee cups. Family court has its own particular weight. Nobody comes to it on their best day. Ryan was in the hallway outside the courtroom with Beaumont and 2 other people I didn't recognize. He was thinner than when I'd seen him at the grocery store. The watch he always wore was gone. He looked at Mara for a moment, then looked away. Patrice stood near the window in a charcoal blazer, her arms folded, her face set into something that was trying to be contempt and landing closer to worry. She saw me looking at her. I nodded once, politely. She looked away first. The judge was a compact woman in her late 50s named Honorable Sandra Voss. She had the deliberate manner of someone who had long since stopped being impressed by courtroom theater. Diane presented the timeline cleanly, without drama. Property records, the original trust documents, the amendment with the disputed signature, Patricia Howell's forensic report, bank records, and the communications Kristen had provided. Beaumont challenged where he could. He questioned the chain of custody on some documents. He suggested the handwriting analysis was inconclusive. He implied Mara's memory of events was shaped by the stress of the separation. Facts have a stubborn habit of surviving cross-examination. Diane just kept presenting them. Then Mara took the stand. I'd been proud of my daughter many times. The morning she called to tell me she'd gotten into the nursing administration program. The afternoon she called to tell me Owen had been born. But watching her sit in that witness chair and answer every question with the same steady, careful honesty she'd used her entire life, I thought there might not be a better version of proud than that. Diane asked her, plainly, "What happened on the evening of February 11th? Mara took a breath. My husband told me he was in love with someone else. Then his sister arrived with luggage. Then he showed me a document and told me I no longer had any legal claim to our home. She paused. And then he told me to figure out where Owen and I were going to go. What did your son do? Mara looked down for a moment. He stopped talking. He wouldn't put his coat on. I had to carry him to the truck. She looked up. Owen is 5. He didn't understand what was happening. He just knew something was wrong, and nobody was explaining it. The courtroom was very quiet. No lawyer was going to improve on that. Kristen testified later. She answered every question directly and without self-pity. Beaumont tried to suggest she was only cooperating to protect her own legal exposure. She didn't argue. I'm cooperating, she said, because I was told a set of lies and I built decisions on top of them. I want the record to reflect what was actually true. Ironically, her refusal to defend herself made her more credible than anything else she could have said. Patrice stood up once, briefly, from her seat in the gallery, and started to say something about the family having been put through enough. Judge Voss looked at her over her glasses with an expression that did not require words. Patrice sat down. For the first time in all the months I'd known her, she had nothing to add to her room. By late afternoon, the judge issued her rulings. Mara received primary residential custody of Owen pending final orders. She was granted exclusive possession of the marital home, while the property matter was resolved through the ongoing criminal proceedings. Ryan was ordered to maintain financial support under the court's temporary framework, and Judge Voss noted, on the record, that the evidence of document fraud was being treated with appropriate seriousness by both the court and the prosecuting authority. It wasn't the end of everything. There would be more hearings, more paperwork, more waiting. But for the first time in months, the weight of not being believed had lifted off Mara's shoulders. I could see it in how she carried herself walking out of that building. Outside, 2 local journalists were waiting near the steps. Ryan and Beaumont pushed through without comment. Patrice stopped, turned to face one of the cameras, and pointed in my direction. That man has destroyed this family, she said. Her voice was sharp, confident, designed to land. The reporter turned toward me. I hadn't planned to say anything. Then I thought about Owen flinching in the kitchen, about Mara standing in the rain on my porch in February, with no jacket and nowhere else to go. I stepped forward. I didn't destroy anything, I said, quietly and clearly. Ryan Calloway forged my daughter's signature and removed her from the legal record of her own home. I just made sure someone found out. Patrice opened her mouth. Nothing came out. We walked to the car. Neither of us looked back. Summer came in slowly that year, the way it does in East Tennessee, warm and green and gradual. Owen finished kindergarten. His teacher sent home a note saying he'd had an excellent spring. He got a small certificate for reading the most books in his class. He showed it to me at the kitchen table, holding it with both hands. Pap, I won. You sure did, buddy. Mara returned to work in June. She came home that first evening looking tired in a good way, the kind of tired that comes from being useful. We had dinner on the back porch, just the 3 of us, with the ceiling fan turning overhead and the evening light going gold through the trees. One evening in late July, I was in the side yard trimming the hedges when a truck pulled into my driveway. I recognized the truck before I recognized the driver. Ryan got out slowly. He was alone. No lawyer, no Patrice, no audience of any kind. He looked like he'd lost weight he hadn't needed to lose, and he was wearing a plain gray shirt that I'd never seen him in before. He looked, for possibly the first time, like an ordinary man. He walked toward me and stopped about 6 feet away. I didn't know if you'd talk to me. I'm standing here. He nodded. He looked down at the grass. I've been seeing a therapist since January. My attorney suggested it initially, but somewhere in the middle of it, I realized I needed it for other reasons. I set the clippers down and waited. I spent a long time telling myself I deserved to be happy, that Mara would be fine, that Owen was young enough that he'd adjust. He shook his head. I kept moving the line of what I was allowed to do, and every time I moved it, I told myself it was fine because I hadn't crossed the new one yet. I didn't say anything. I came because I need Owen to know I didn't disappear. He looked at me directly for the first time. Not because a judge is making me, because I keep thinking about the night Mara carried him out to the truck. He didn't say a word. 5 years old and he just went quiet. A mockingbird called from the maple tree along the fence. Down the street, someone's lawnmower started up. There's a letter, he said. He took a folded envelope from his shirt pocket. For Mara. I don't expect anything from it. I just wanted her to have it. I took the envelope. I didn't open it. She'll decide what she wants to do with it. I know. He exhaled slowly. My company let me go. The press around the fraud charges. I nodded. Kristen went back to Charlotte. He said it without bitterness. Only a man accepting consequences sounds like that. He looked at me for a moment. Patrice still thinks you went looking for trouble. What do you think? I think you protected your daughter. He paused. I think I gave you reason to. That was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. He held out his hand. 6 months earlier, I would have looked at it and walked away. I shook it. Not because everything was resolved, because holding on to the anger had already cost all of us enough. Hatred is expensive. It charges you every day and it never gives you anything back. He got in his truck and drove away. I watched until he turned the corner. The back door opened. Owen came running out in his grass-stained shorts, holding a baseball in one glove. Pap, will you throw with me? Yeah, I said. Go grab the other glove off the shelf in the garage. He ran. Mara appeared in the doorway with 2 glasses of lemonade, looked at the empty driveway, and then at me. Was that Ryan? It was. She thought about it. What did he want? He wanted to tell you he's going to try to be Owen's father. I looked at her. He left a letter. It's your call, whether you read it. She held out her hand. I gave it to her. She looked at it for a long moment, then set it on the porch rail without opening it. Maybe tomorrow, she said. Owen came sprinting back from the garage with both gloves, one on his hand and one flapping in the air. I'm ready. I caught one of the gloves and tugged it on. We walked out to the side yard together, me and my grandson, and started throwing. The ball made a clean, satisfying sound every time it landed in the leather. The evening was warm. The light was long and slow, the way summer evenings get when the best part of the day decides to stay a little longer. Mara sat on the porch steps and watched us. Owen dove for a low throw. I bounced too wide, missed it completely, then scrambled up laughing. Try again, I told him. He picked up the ball. He threw it back harder than before. I caught it and threw it again. We kept going until the light faded to purple and fireflies appeared along the fence line. This was not what I had imagined when I pictured things getting better. I had pictured something larger. A courtroom ruling, a verdict, a public acknowledgement of everything that had been done wrong. I got all of those things. But they weren't this. This was Owen's laugh cutting through the dark. This was Mara with her feet tucked under her on the porch steps, not looking at anything with dread for the first time in months. This was ordinary, and it had cost us so much to get back to it that ordinary felt like the finest thing in the world. If I've learned one thing at 63, it's this. The people who try to erase you from your own story always underestimate how many people are still reading it. Real protection isn't dramatic. It's showing up, staying calm when every instinct tells you to do otherwise, trusting the truth to do what anger never can, and refusing, absolutely refusing, to let the people you love be quietly erased from lives they built and earned and deserve to keep. If any of you have walked through something like this, or watched someone you love walk through it, I want you to know the winter ends. I've watched it happen twice now. Once when I lost Joanne, and once when I almost lost my daughter. Both times I was wrong about how long the cold would last, and both times I was glad I stayed the course. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Take care of the people at your table. That's all any of us can really do. When the people you love are being quietly erased from their own lives, the most powerful thing you can do is stay steady, stay patient, and trust that the truth has a way of arriving even when it's late. Russell didn't save his daughter with anger. He saved her by showing up calmly, one phone call and one document at a time. That kind of quiet, stubborn love is something every one of us can offer someone we care about. A small note for you, this story was created and fictionalized by AI, shared here for your entertainment and in the hope that the lesson it carries about protecting the ones you love with patience and grace leaves something worth keeping.